thank you very much for inviting me today. I didn't know quite what awaited me, and therefore I haven't produced a carefully crafted spiel with copious notes. Such notes as I have are here, one side only. However, my powers of improvisation are legendary. You may be here all night, I mean. Your principal interest is clearly that of fireworks, and I deduce that most of you are not professional pyrotechnists, but you, I almost said mess about with fireworks. You make fireworks, you study the pyrotechnic art in your spare time, as I did myself when I was in my early teens. And then I started studying chemistry at school, and it was an extension, it was part of chemistry. I should say that from the age of about, once I finished studying chemistry formally, or at least I thought I'd finished, so I made another start. I went into the pharmaceutical industry, and I got thrown out of the pharmaceutical industry for what I believe they considered an excess of honesty about the desirability of some of their products. And as the IRA were doing nasty things in Northern Ireland, my mind went back to explosives, and I have never looked back. I got stuck with explosives. I'm quite pleased to be stuck with explosives. Let me mention some fireworks. You probably have much more advanced knowledge than I do about fireworks and modern tendencies in firework science. Whistling fireworks were considered quite clever things when I was young, but now you have things that resonate, things that squeal, and things that can flash automatically at various frequencies, and I expect some of you played with such compositions. I didn't do that. I made whistling fireworks, but not the sort that resonate. I was a child during the Second World War, and any of you of a comparable age will probably recognise that as a German, I think 1 or 1.2 kilo incendiary bomb, made out of a magnesium alloy, principally magnesium, called Magnesium, magnesium and aluminium. And the reason it's made out of that is that it burns very well once you've got the thing going. One good thing about wars is that if you stay alive, you can occasionally pick up things like that in your garden, or after a German air raid you can go out and pick up bits of things that haven't gone off, and you can find remnants of some of the things that the British fired against the German aircraft, which did go off and then came down and caused damage that usually went unreported. I came across the head of an artillery shell, not artillery shell, an anti-aircraft shell. The nose of an anti-aircraft shell that I found as a child only about 3 weeks ago. I restituted it to my office and identified it. Now, one of the good things about finding a bomb like that is you can, I had no machine tools, but my father had a workbench, and on it was a substantial vice, which I still use. I was using it only yesterday. It's now in the office in the workshop of my company. I'm chairman of a company. It's a tiny company. We're growing fast, but we're only about 10 people. So it gives me a degree of independence. You can clap something like that in a vice, and you can take a hacksaw, and you can take a file, and you can rasp away for hours and hours in the most primitive way, and you can land up with a good pile of magnesium filing. And one could go down to the chemist, and I trust one still can, and buy potassium permanganate, If you're careful worker, you can grind it up, or you can use it as it is, and you mix it with magnesium powder, and you have a very easily ignited and fast-burning flash powder. And I used to roll paper tubes, newspaper, round pencils to make myself fairly substantial cases for bangers, and used flour paste. I knew nothing better. Closed one end and put saltpeter soaked tissue paper round the other end. And these were very primitive devices, but I must say that they went off with a commendable bang. And then I realised, during the war you can buy fireworks, I realised that bangers are supposed to be about this size, not that size. But it was in my blood by then. I found that another useful and available oxidizing agent was sodium chlorate. Now, sodium chlorate, I wouldn't rush into playing with sodium chlorate. You must be careful with it. And I found it has great disadvantage that it's so hygroscopic, unlike potassium chlorate, which you can make compositions with that stay dry forever in a reasonable climate. Sodium chlorate really quickly sucks moisture from the air. I had one or two school friends, and we used to discuss these things. So where I learned it, I don't know. But you can make quite a commendable explosive by soaking sodium chlorate, by soaking newspaper again in sodium chlorate solution, and then drying it. Takes a bit of drying because you have to fight its hygroscopic tendency. I discovered two things about newspaper, which is soaked in sodium chlorate and then dried. First of all, once it is dry, and you put a match to it, it really flares. Secondly, I discovered that if you're in your living room and you're drying this in front of the fire, you don't need a match. I used to get some brown paper and roll, probably around my mother's knitting needle, roll tubes probably of about 3/16 of an inch in diameter. Knitting hadn't gone metric in those days, and I shoved that full of bits of newspaper soaked in sodium chlorate, and then rolled it flat and then zigzagged it and tied it with string to make jumping crackers. Now, I don't do regulations anymore, controls regulations. They're too long and they have things like B bracket 57, close bracket. I can't remember all that stuff. I believe that those things have been prohibited. So one of the duties that I have towards my grandchildren while I'm still alive and they haven't digressed, they haven't taken the wrong way in life, is to teach them how to make jumping crackers, but not with sodium chlorate. The other thing is I picked up some drying sodium chlorate soaked paper once, a bit roughly, and I realised how sensitive it is to friction. And it took stories of people in hot, dry countries using sodium chlorate as weed killer to kill grass, and then sitting down and, mind you, if they're smokers, they have only themselves to blame. If discard the maggot and they're more or less sitting in the middle of a garden that blows out, I can only sneer. Smokers should be encouraged to use sodium chlorate. Nothing personal, but it could easily become so as we go. Sodium chlorate, the tendency of it to cause organic material paper or cloth to flare has been used rather nastily by soaking clothing in the substance and drying it, and then if you're brave enough, you can wear it to where you want to do something nasty. But if you can persuade someone to wear it, then it needs only a spark and they're dead. They're not nice, but people who do that sort of thing for a living on that sort of scale sometimes do nasty things. That shuts you up. My first experience with rockets was with the German V2, which, if I remember correctly, has a diameter of something like that. And one of them came down. The first one I used to hear them going bang, but one of them went seriously bang and blew my, not my head off, my hat off. And I thought, this is interesting. And, the interesting thing is that you are used to hearing rockets go whoosh, bang. That's an outgoing rocket. With an incoming rocket, it may go whoosh, bang, but if it's supersonic, it goes bang, and then if you're A, alive, and B, can still hear, you then hear the whoosh, which is quite different. Yeah, you should try the experiment. I came a bit close to trying the experiment, but I was using only gunpowder, so there's not having a chance of getting supersonic. I used to make. I'm afraid that I was too late to see this demonstration of loading rockets. I used to use a wooden or brass drift, and there's a great merit in the traditional way. I presume that is highly frowned on nowadays. And then I would use plaster of Paris, because I was lazy in each end, and use the little hand drills I still have to drill a hole for axial ignition. And the rockets going up from my parents' back garden, my back garden, was entertaining. But then I thought two-stage rocket could be interesting. Now people think of two-stage rockets are going whoosh like this and then separating and then going whoosh and then you want to move. No, my idea of a two-stage rocket is going whoosh, whoosh. That is fun. With your 100 grams, you can amuse yourself. I moved on from rockets on bangers. Yes. Nowadays, people have electronic cameras, but in my day as a child, I couldn't afford a camera till I think I was in my early 20s. It was paper wrapped. And some of the paper was very strong and very hard. And I used to go to the local chemist, I remember his name, Dan the chemist, in Ilford, northeast of England. That's how I became acquainted with things that Germans dropped on us. And he used to provide me with the backing paper of film which he was going to develop. And I organised some friends in the sixth form to I hadn't worked as a table, roll numerous tubes of this very, very strong paper, very good for bangers. If you're not allowed to make or don't want to make big ones, you may as well make your little ones work. I thought they could work quite well. More recently, what I really do for a living, and what my, dare I say, occasional television persona suggests I do, are not exactly the same. So I'm quite pleased to do some innocuous things when someone waves a camera in front of me. And there's a chap for whom I have quite a bit of respect called Adam Hart Davis. Some of you will probably know. He makes films on technical things. And he was doing some on rocketry and warfare, the history of rocketry and warfare, and in rescuing ships by throwing lines and so on. He asked me to make some big rockets about this size. I had no reasonable way of making a rocket that size. So what I did was acquire a whole load. I have a friend who gets rid of life-expired ships' rescue flares, which are rocket propelled. And I simply took the the flare off the rocket. The rocket then is a little tube like a short fat cotton reel. So I would stack these, a bunch of 3, say, near one end of the rocket body, and a stack of 3 there, and then encapsulate them in plastic. And I would arrange for the exhaust, the effluent of the rockets to come into a little chamber here, and then the chamber will be vented through a nozzle. So the first one that I demonstrated for this televisual purpose, multi-purpose rocket, really annoy people sometimes. It had a single venturi. I believe that this was to replicate the Congreve military rocket. And it had a stick. You necessarily tie a stick on the side. By modern standards, that's not a very elegant way of getting something to go straight. Okay for fireworks, but not for serious working rockets. And size 11 should suggest this was quite a serious one. Can't remember how many mini rockets inside it had. And it went whoosh and it disappeared and so on, and that bit of film was done. And then there was another rocket which was improved because it had a stick for guidance, but the stick was stuck in the hole in the back. That is not the venturi or the hole for the gas to come out of, that's the stick. It has, in this case, 4 radial holes which are parallel with the axis of the rocket. So, not surprisingly, you had 4 squirts of flame and the rocket went up. But then, for my last shot in this series, I decided to rotate the rocket. I mean, I didn't decide on the spur of the moment. This was with after discussion with the chap whose film it was. I was a mere rude mechanical as far as the film was concerned. It was not exactly a speaking role, but I had during the Iran versus Iraq misunderstanding in the Gulf, which led to the so-called Gulf War, I was doing marine salvage, that's using explosives to chop up tankers which had been attacked by rockets from small boats by the Revolutionary Guard, so-called, the Iranians, and also by aircraft with mercenary pilots. And I was at the receiving end of some of those things, and this is the rear end of one of the rockets that they fired. Now this has you've got 6 holes, venturas in the back, but these are at an angle. Whereas the holes, these are at an angle. That is more or less the angle from the axis of the rocket. Now they don't need fins because they are rotation stabilized like a rifle bullet or artillery shell. So I thought, or I was asked, to demonstrate the principle of rotation stabilization, or whatever it's called. So I made my own, with that in mind, I made my own venturi, or rear plug, but as I wanted to demonstrate it very clearly for the television viewing public, I didn't put the angle in something like that. I put it in at about 45 degrees. So, trust me, this rocket really spun. And it went whoosh, and I can't remember hearing a whirring noise, so I think it was too fast for that. But it was extremely stable. Now, it wasn't a very clear day, or quite used to having days that aren't clear days. So, in front at the sharp end of the rocket, from here onwards, it's empty, or it's empty now. What I did was fill it with flash powder, so that when the rockets are burned out, there will be a great flash, and people will say, oh, there's a flash, look how far it went, or how far it didn't go, or how high it went, or how it's spinning. So, fire this in, whoosh it went, and it was rotating. And it was extremely stabilized, because it was rotating very, very fast. I mean, the radial, the circumferential speed was roughly the same as the linear speed, because it's 45 degrees. Then this thing went off with a hell of a flash and a bang. It performed its role perfectly, except it performed an additional function. Think of this as a gun barrel. It had recoil. It shot the rocket down. The rocket came down rather faster as it went up, and it was beautiful, because it went up like that, bang, and it came down like this. And it went over our heads, over the camera, just missed the vehicle that we needed for our escape. I don't think I've done anything with rockets since then other than blow them up. I may show you, if you're good, I may show you some film of how to blow up rockets. That's fun, because the other people do all the work. The people who make it in factories around the world, they make them, I merely blow them up. Now this is where I must be careful not to lead you astray. I can state as hard fact, or I suffer from the delusion that, at the moment, it's not in the national interest to prosecute it. I could be wrong, but I think it ain't, because of certain services that I'm required to render. And I invite you to count my eyes, which both work, more or less, and my fingers. So I've been doing this for some time. So people think that there's a naughty, naughty substance being made somewhere in the world that goes down. If you look at it, they say, we think it's this, can you make some? So I spend a significant part of my life now making naughty, naughty substances, not of a physiological nature. Some of them, nitroglycerin and alcohol nitrates, as you probably know, do have a strong physiological action, but that's not what I'm employed to make them for. But in short, the time came when I really did have to move into high explosives. I started in my teens, and I have mentioned Dan the chemist, who used to provide me with film backing. He also, what else is he? He provided me, I believe, with my first sample of Picric acid, which is it's one of my favourite explosives. The great disadvantage is that it stains your fingers bright yellow, and when you try to wash them, the alkalinity of the soap or the hard water district of the water turns your fingers orange. And if the police are after you, they probably don't know this anymore nowadays, but up to 20, 30, 40 years ago, if there was a bang and someone had bright yellow fingers, it may mean that he smoked alcohol, but if it's that colour, that is picric acid. It's very easily initiated. It's not dangerous to handle. It's demonised now because it forms sensitive salts, percussion sensitive and friction sensitive salts with some metals, particularly lead, and also to some extent copper. So people around the world are scared stiff if they find a shell that they think may have contained picric acid, because some of the picric acid could have touched the driving band of the shell. You could be in the presence of copper picric. But just don't let it dry out. If it's in the sea, just keep it wet until you blow it up. But we have an American gentleman among us, and your country has helped me in various ways. And Pearl Harbor is a very useful place because Pearl Harbor, as you probably know, is part of Hawaii group of islands, and it was attacked by the Japanese. The warships there were attacked by the Japanese, and things got nastier after that. And then the war eventually finished, but there were big arsenals on this island of Hawaii, and the Americans were free to go home after the war. And they thought, we've got magazines full of things like shells. What shall we do with them? So they put them in boats. I don't think they actually rowed, but they took them out to sea and chucked them over the side. Then went back for another lot. Now, most volcanoes in the sea, you probably know, they may stick up like that, but then because they erode quickly, they have a shelf. Then the shelf drops away. They went to a couple of hundred yards out of Pearl Harbor and chucked them over the side. If they had gone another quarter of a mile, it would have been in irretrievably deep water. So now they're trying, the traditional industries there have collapsed. Tourism is one of the big things, and they want to try to get rid of some of these shells because they're now encouraging scuba diving and things like that. And people are swimming among lots and lots of shells which were dumped in shallow water. And a large number of them contain ammonium picrate, which explosive D in American parlance. And I demonstrated ways to use this as a bit of a test site to get rid of them relatively gently. So there's quite a lot of picric acid around. Anyway, that was Mr. Dan Down, the chemist man, who used to tell me that when I was a child. I don't think he would anymore. There was another chemist shop at Dance Hill, never knew the name of that, but he, when I was in my mid-teens, would sell me white phosphorus, which admittedly you have to order it in for me, and that's where I got my first sample of sodium azide from. He sold me enough to kill probably about 30, 40 people. I mean, poison them. But also enough to make several hundred detonators if you don't need big ones. So my standard detonator was a 2-2-long cartridge case, just full of lead azide. I've still kept that bottle for sentimental reasons, and it still has some sodium azide there. I now have another, I mean I could buy all the sodium azide I wanted quite legitimately, but I do actually, for particularly demonstration purposes, I do use another off-the-record source of it to warn people what's out there. So I do actually make it from scrap, but I won't tell you what the scrap is. In those days, farmers were allowed to blow up their own tree stumps, and that implied that beautiful invention of Mr. Bickford's safety fuse. So I could go to a little hardware shop on a bridge going over the river in Tiverton, where I had country cousins, and buy safety fuse. And I've still got some of that original safety fuse. It's gone a bit irregular now, I discovered to my slight shock and horror recently. But that I would put into a 2-2 cartridge case, which it fits very closely. My main explosive, when I just wanted to make a bang, was ammonium nitrate and aluminium, which was easily initiated, and which has now come back into very important use. I can't do this sort of experiment at home because it's just too noisy, but there are a couple of countries that have deserts where I'm made quite welcome, and I make ammonium nitrate aluminium in 15 or 20 kilo lots now. That is one unit, and it goes off beautifully. So some of this stuff of my life is coming round again. You will all know about gunpowder, known as black powder. One reason it became known as black powder apparently was to differentiate it from the other powders which started to pop up in the early 19th century because the chemical industry developed. And a chap called Guthrie, now I don't think he invented, but he made a lot of money, I think he made a lot of money selling huge quantities of Guthrie's yellow powder. Now if you're interested in not more than 100 gram quantities, and I wouldn't do this in 100 gram quantity, but Guthrie's yellow powder consisted not of potassium nitrate, sulfur, carbon, but potassium nitrate, sulfur, and potassium carbonate. But I hear you cry, carbonates, like sodium carbonate, potassium carbonate, you can put on a fire to put the fire out. Yes, yes. But the way that he did it was to mix these in suitable proportion and heat them on an iron plate until they melted, the mixture melted. And that gives you immediately a very great degree of homogeneity. you don't have to crush the powder very finely, because if it's molten, the components will mix together. And when it turns brown enough, he would stop heating it and let it cool, and then he would crush it up and would sell it. He's said to have had the power, the velocity, and I believe power, about 3 times that of gunpowder. No, it couldn't have had 3 times the power, 3 times the velocity of gunpowder. Unfortunately, several times, mixing heroic quantity, the stuff went bang while he was stirring it. And somehow he managed to retain his arms and his well, I wouldn't say eyes, his head. He was a most persistent person with whom I had great admiration. But anyway, if you do this on, for example, a tin candy and heat it over a small flame, it will go with a hell of a bang. No confinement at all. Don't confine it. You just use, I would suggest, no more than a teaspoonful, especially if it's in your kitchen and you've got expensive champagne glasses and so forth about it. And don't drink the champagne before you do this experiment. It will, a teaspoon will blow a hole through the tin plate, like picric acid mixed with lead oxide. You probably know that one. Except that makes a real mess of your kitchen. This doesn't. Now, the interesting thing is that if you heat potassium nitrate with potassium carbonate by himself, I mean, mix it and then heat it, there's no way that would explode. But what will happen is some of the potassium nitrate will probably decompose to give, I beg your pardon, let me start again. If you take saltpeter, potassium nitrate, known to the ancient, you can buy it easily. It's worth, I think, if you're interested in fireworks and explosives, actually trying to find a wall, for example, a cellar near a cemetery or something like that, where there's lots of nitrogen in the ground, and see if you can, during the dry season, find the colourless, sparkling efflorescence of crystals. But that's mainly potassium nitrate. I have re-crystallised some from a friend's cellar, and made gunpowder with that, and it went to very good bang. Then I tried it without any purification at all. That went with very good bang. So, at least in many samples, it's very pure. My friend lives in the middle of France, and it's a very old farm he lives in. And crusaders used to stop there on their way to kill the Arabs. And I have very low opinion of crusaders. And they certainly drank well, of those who could afford it, and they certainly wouldn't have bothered to go much further in the courtyard before relieving themselves. So I like to think that by going slightly below ground level on the other side of the wall, the crystals that I gathered were partly formed by and excreted by crusaders. And it was very, very good bang. Now, if you take saltpeter and you melt it in a test tube, for example, I don't advocate the unthinking use of goggles, because that will I don't want to lull people or myself into a false sense of security. In this case, you may be wise to put goggles on. You take charcoal and drop little bits in. It will catch fire spontaneously. And do that, keep doing it, until it no longer reacts. That means your saltpeter has all been turned to potassium carbonate. Now, potassium carbonate is the stuff that Guthrie mixed in his mixture. Potassium nitrate, potassium carbonate, and sulfur. No carbon. The carbons had pre-reacted, as it were, with the saltpeter to make the most unpromising of components, potassium carbonate. However, an interesting thing is that if you these are substances. This preparation required no more substances than were not available to the Chinese and the Arabs and the Indians, who centuries and centuries before the Europeans could make decent gunpowder, these were all substances available to them. And I now started wondering when claims of highly superior gunpowder from a particular region or a particular country were made several hundred years ago, whether in fact it wasn't gunpowder, but was actually, was gunpowder, but not that powder as we know it, was whether they had anticipated, without understanding any of the chemistry, gutless mixture. So I commend for your consideration a possible experiment that. But keep your confidence down, and don't mix cupfuls on steel plates and so. But in reason, it will make you think. What do we do? What do we do? What do I do, and what does my company do nowadays? We don't amuse ourselves, I'm afraid, with things that go whiz and bang like that. We don't make weaponry. I have seen, and indeed been on the receiving end of enough weaponry in my life, and but I'm very interested in bombs and things that go bang. And my main interest in them is that it seems that for every person who is killed by a bomb, you're likely, unless you wipe out the whole family or whole village in one shot, which is not easily done, for every bomb that goes off and injures someone, especially if it injures or kills someone, you're probably making yourself half a dozen enemies at least. So, I haven't had the opportunity to blow up there, and he's come back to the country now. So I screwed up in that respect, because you better be careful. So most of what we do now is in frustrating the efforts of two things. One, trying to render bombs and other munitions when they're found safe, explosive ordnance disposal, EOD, and also going around developing methods and going round. I have to do it myself for practice sake, and then can show other people who sometimes adopt the methods and gadgets in places where there have been wars, but the wars are now over. For example, the so-called Vietnam War. The neighbouring country in Indochina is last. One of the neighbouring countries is last, and that's the most heavily bombed country per capita in the world. I believe, including Iraq and Afghanistan. And largely because it's a very soft soil on much of that country, a very large proportion of bombs didn't explode. Even so-called Mark 18 series things, big fat things, which the smallest is that fat, and the biggest about that fat, the shortest about that long, and the tallest about that long. Many are just lying around, waiting to explode. You may say, but after all this time they wouldn't explode, would they? Alas, yes. Sometimes when people want to clear forest for a plantation, sometimes sad, but there we are, they go bang and kill people. Many submunitions just lying around, many of them are like little like baseballs or cricket balls. They have shed their outer aerodynamic bits, and children still pick them up and play with them. And these are 2 generations after they were dropped. So there is an awful lot of work to be done clearing up those. Now, any damn fool can, within a week or two, learn how to take a pack of plastic explosive or block of TNT and stick it on a bomb, stick in a detonator, light a fuse or connect it through a wire and go a long way away and press the button and cause it to detonate. That in the trade is called high ordering. I much prefer low ordering, i.e. decorating, fancy Latin word, decadare means of flame. In other words, get it to the explosive to burn, usually violently, so that the bomb is split open but doesn't detonate. It's a bit counterproductive if a village which has been wiped out by those bombs that did explode, gets rebuilt after the war. Some bright spark finds one that hadn't exploded, and then calls in an expert who goes and detonates it and blows up the village again. The emphasis of what we do is to get rid of these things, but to do it gently. I have two gadgets, two classes of gadget that we use for this. This is the most frequently used gadget which we make. It depends upon an invention of mine. We call this the Vulcan, and it's, you can see the white stuff, that's actually plastic explosive with a conical cavity. And I didn't invent that shape. That's called it's the most common form of shaped charge. In most of its manifestations, it's used in warheads, for example, RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades. These usually, careful how I don't aim at my room. They have copper cones, and as detonation proceeds from the apex of the cone towards the mouth of the cone, it squeezes the metal down and it produces what's called the jet. It's a narrow squirt of exceedingly fast travelling metal, high density metal, copper, and it just goes through the armour of the side of the tank like those swords. I thought what would happen if I were to take a shaped charge, I thought it was about 35 years ago, what would happen if you take a shaped charge and replace the copper liner with water? It should produce an extremely fast jet of water, unless it's a bit counterintuitive, because if you make a detonation of high explosive immediately next to a thin layer of water, common sense will tell you that the water will immediately evaporate in a puff of steam. However, if you consider the enormous pressure to which that cone of water is subjected, it may not be able to boil away. It may go into what physicists among you will recognise as the critical state, but it will still have a density of 1, and it would travel exceedingly fast. And I did the experiment, and it travels extremely fast. So one of the things that we do is to, my original experiments I did with jelly. I came up with a mixture of a jelly, and I became skilled at casting extremely accurate and extremely thin walled cones of jelly, which I would place delicately, or which I would cast into the explosive. Now I cheat, and I put in a little very thin walled plastic cone, fill that up with water, beer, orange juice, any known liquid. You all have bladders. And then put in a second cone, which forms a plastic, water, plastic cone. And you can fire that into quite sensitive explosives without setting them off. For soft things like handbags and things, you can use a gun barrel and shoot a blank cartridge, use a blank cartridge to shoot water at it. But this is a mortar bomb. If you really don't want this to go off, you can fire one of these charges and you can see the hole that it makes. And it pressurises it, pops the fuse out, the bomb is now safe. Still got a dangerous fuse, you better blow that up, but you don't have a bang this size. The British and Americans have this sort, very similar mortar bombs, the 81mm. I think that the thread is different, because one of these charges suffices to eject the fuse from an American bomb, and need 2 for the British one. That doesn't prove the British is best, I saw you, but just realised some 2 sizes, but suffice for one. Now, the other bright idea I had in EOD was to replace the copper with another metal. Now, copper is very high density metal. It's very ductile, so it forms a jet very well. So it is very good at penetrating the sides of other people's armour, and it's relatively cheap. Gold is also very good. But if you fire it as munition, it's very likely that the munition will detonate in consequence. So I came up with a bright idea of using magnesium stuff the bombs are made of. Because magnesium has a very low density, only 1.4 compared with 9.8 or something like that. And so that makes it a very poor initiator of detonation in the target munition. However, as the cone is collapsed and formed, it ignites. And what it produces is a white-hot squirt of molten and burning magnesium. And you can shoot that into something as small as a hand grenade, and it will ignite it, and it will burst it open. It's not as penetrating as copper, but it will still go through the side of a big fat bunker buster bomb. You'll have to be acquainted with the Blue 109. It is the standard method of rendering those safe now. Put a row of 3 on and shoot holes in, and it ignites its loader. It doesn't hit it violently enough to cause it to detonate, but it burns. And it burns and it burns, and the pressure goes up as the cavity of burning explosive enlarges until the poor old bomb can't take the pressure anymore, and it shoots the fuse up extremely fast, too fast for it to have time to react. That is not, I'm not giving away military secrets. If you have a Blue 109 problem, let me know. What I may do is to proceed into a field or somewhere, and we'll shoot some water or orange juice or something from this through a little steel plate. I dare not bring along a mortar bomb because it would look bad. And there we are. I think what I'll do now is, I'll tell you what else I did bring. Now, it's a matter of debate whether that is a little too large, but this is the big growler. That's got a pound of plastic explosive in, and that is a magnesium cone. I hear you say, magnesium is not bright red. No, you're right. But I painted it bright red because that tells the operator that may not have seen it for some time. That is incendiary. Red means fire. And that is very, very hot. And what I thought, it'd be very nice if we could do it after dark, but nights are to shoot it upwards and see a sheer squirt of burning magnesium go up into the sky. What he's blown, how far is the heat throw?